Hi, my name is Patty Holland, and I'm the Director of Community Development and Human Resources for Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey. CSPNJ is a consumer-operated agency that provides self-help, supported housing, and economic development opportunities for people living with mental illness. Our services and support emphasize a wellness and recovery framework. I've worked in the field of mental health, housing, and residential services for over 25 years. My experience has shown me that people with mental illness can live productive, successful, and satisfying lives in the community. In fact, when housing is addressed first and people live in safe, decent housing of their choosing, they often have the energy and interest to focus on things that support their wellness, recovery, rehabilitation, and treatment. This module details the abilities of people with mental illness to live independently and to manage the barriers that they experience when attempting to obtain housing of their choice. You will also learn about some of the supports and skills that can lead to successful community living for people with mental illness. When you think of people with mental illness, where do you think they live? Do you believe they can live on their own?
Certain types of residential options for people with mental illness are segregated from the larger community and tend to make recovery and integration more difficult. Psychiatric institutions and halfway houses, often referred to as congregate settings, are considered outdated housing options for people with mental illness. There has been a significant shift in thinking about the way in which housing is viewed for people with mental illness. Housing is now conceptualized as permanent and as a home rather than a residential treatment site. Therefore, people with mental illness live in the same types of housing as we all do: apartments, single-family homes, multifamily homes, and so on. Individuals with mental illness can live successfully in the community with varying levels of support. Some of these individuals choose to live independently, while others prefer to access necessary supports and resources to run their households. Consumers of mental health services want the same things as all people do when it comes to housing preferences: freedom, permanence, security, and privacy. People with mental illness most frequently report wanting to live alone, with a partner, or with family. These are all possible, but for some, the housing options available do not meet the individual's preferences. In many cases, the mental illness and its associated symptoms are not the main barriers for people who wish to live independently. Instead, the decline in affordable housing and the rising cost of housing in relation to people's income are the main problems. There are ways to reduce the barriers associated with obtaining affordable and safe housing. People with mental illness must be encouraged by providers, family, and peers to explore career paths and work in the areas that interest them. Increased income can increase people's ability to save for their future and access housing of their choice. In addition, people with mental illness need accurate information about benefits, housing subsidies, and resources in the community. Individuals also need to learn more about the entitlements they currently receive. Many are concerned that working and living independently will lead to a reduction or loss of their benefits. Practitioners can help ease these fears by providing information on the many benefit incentives for people who are attempting to return to work and live as independently as possible in the community. An additional barrier to housing for people with disabilities is the stigma associated with mental illness. Some landlords do not want to rent their apartments to individuals who receive rent from the state or federal government. One such subsidy is called a Section 8 voucher. A Section 8 voucher is a form of rental assistance which some people with disabilities and/or fixed incomes receive. Landlords sometimes refuse to rent to individuals receiving these types of subsidies due to their stereotypical attitudes toward people with disabilities and/or low income. Others don't want people with mental illness as neighbors and are fearful that society needs protection from such people. These negative attitudes regarding people with mental illness are sometimes referred to by the acronym NIMBY, which means Not in My Backyard. Despite these stigmatizing beliefs, Landlords eventually discover that people with mental illness make excellent tenants, pay their rent on time, and do not cause disturbances just because they have a mental illness. Neighbors, too, realize that people with mental illness don't cause trouble merely because of the illness or because they need and use rental assistance. People with mental illness often prove to be great neighbors, acquaintances, and friends because of their insight and empathy. Once an individual has decided to live independently in the community, they can benefit from learning independent living skills. Some people with mental illness may have never had the opportunity to learn the skills necessary to live successfully in the community. This may be because they became ill during a time when most people are gaining their independence and moving out of their family home. In addition, some individuals did learn the skills, but have lost them due to long periods of hospitalizations and relapse. People can, however, learn or relearn the important skills for living independently. Aren't these the skills that all people need for living independently in the community? Supported housing is an option for people who would like to live as independently as possible in the community, but still receive support, access to resources, and skills training. Staff members who work in a supported housing agency provide supports and resources to individuals so they can successfully maintain their households. Supported housing is based on the following principles. Choice. Housing options should be based on the consumer's preferences and choices, not merely on what is available. A home. Housing options should be a home, not a place to receive treatment for mental illness. In addition, the person's residential status should not be contingent upon receiving mental health services. Stability. Housing options should be long-term and stable, not transitional in nature. People should feel comfortable knowing that as long as they abide by the terms of their lease, they will maintain their living situation. Affordable and safe. Housing options should be affordable and safe. Once individuals have chosen the type of living environment that matches their needs and preferences, professional support should be provided in a flexible and ongoing way. One type of support or skill that a supported housing worker could help develop is relationship building. Many times, people need to practice the skill of communicating with a landlord. In addition, living skills like cooking, cleaning, and budgeting may need to be reviewed. Finally, the development of natural supports is a key element for many people who are living independently in the community. Therefore, some skills teaching may revolve around developing relationships with neighbors, joining local clubs, or making new friends.
While I was first living with mental illness, I was staying with my parents in a guest house they owned. At that time, my therapist suggested that I live independently and get a Section 8 voucher. I applied for one and was put on a 2-year waiting list. A few months later, my parents' guest house was closed down and I was left homeless. I was put into an emergency program where I was placed in a hotel room paid for by the Red Cross until my Section 8 voucher came. A supported housing program called CSP, Collaborative Support Programs, secured an apartment for me and became my landlord once I received my voucher. I've been living in the same apartment for 5 years, and I couldn't be happier.
For individuals not involved in supported housing, there are other less community-integrated options. Those are boarding homes, shelters, and supervised group homes. These options are not nearly as flexible, individualized, or driven by consumer choice as supported housing. However, for many people leaving the hospital or looking for immediate housing, they are sometimes the only available options.
To find out more about collaborative support programs of New Jersey and housing options for people with mental illness, you can visit these websites, www.cspnj.org and www.shanj.org. Thank you.